Hi, I'm That Slavic Writer Guy, and today we're going to be talking about what is quite possibly the most famous opera in the entire worldwide repertoire. Can you guess what it is? Yep, it's Carmen. The story of an army soldier who leaves his goody-two-shoes girlfriend for a fierce seductress determined to live her life by nothing but her own whims no matter what, and then gets killed by that soldier for leaving him for a narcissistic bullfighter after causing the soldier to basically ruin his life for her. To find out how one of the most famous opening night flops in operatic history became one of the world's most iconic operas today, Tremo Opero. Carmen premiered at the Théâtre Comique in Paris on the 3rd of March, 1875. It received a beyond cold reception, only to close after only 33 performances shortly thereafter. Now, Carmen is by no means alone when it comes to operas that have withstood the test of time and yet that also were practically booed off the stage on their opening night. Its initial flop is, however, perhaps the most notorious in all of the operatic world. So, to clear things up here, it is not true that the music of Carmen, which is undeniably spectacular, was simply bad on the night it premiered, but really just more that it perhaps premiered in the wrong venue. So, Bizet had received a commission from the Opéra Comique for the opera, and he composed the music for the opera in the accepted fashion of Opéra Comique for France at that time. However, he decided to take things much more in an unconventional way for opera, what was expected of opera comique at that time, due to his portrayal, his immoral and depraved portrayal of the actions of the main characters. And when goers of the opera comique saw this, it was downright controversial, just scandalous for them. It just wasn't what they were expected. They were expecting stories of fanfare, which Carmen undeniably has in spades, but also of a generally lighthearted story with pure morals for the mid 19th century that you might expect to take your kiddies to on a Saturday afternoon. So put another way, in modern times, it's like if someone signed a contract for a TV show that you might expect to see on a network like Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon, and then you delivered a dark thriller that premiered on that channel. The problem isn't necessarily that the thriller was bad, but that it was just shown to the wrong audience, and that audience responded accordingly. Now, it was only through subsequent performances of Carmen that took place outside of France, which largely replaced the spoken dialogue that was the required convention of French comic opera with Italian-style recitatives, among other things, that Carmen came to achieve a state of notoriety starting about only 10 years after the original performance. It's important to note there is no definitive version of Carmen. It was revised multiple times in the lead up to its initial premiere, and then Bizet's friends and others took over afterwards with further modifications due to the fact that Bizet died shortly after Carmen's initial performance. It was really his late blooming triumph that he never saw. He died only 3 months after Carmen received its poorly received premiere, and never really knew what he had created. So with that misconception about Carmen being a flop its opening night, which is true but also not true, let's move on to our main cast of characters. Starting off, we've got Don Jose, an enlisted man in the local army barracks who is played by a tenor, and as we meet him is generally a moral, nice, likable guy. We've then got Michaela, his girlfriend from his home village, who is played by a soprano, and she is a really innocent, nice, caring, well-meaning young woman. After that, we have our title character, Carmen. She is a gypsy who, as we meet her, is working in the local tobacco factory and who is determined to live her life by very libertarian mores. No matter what, she's going to do what she wants, when she wants it, because she wants it, and that is how she is totally determined to live her life. And if anyone falls in love with her, she makes clear at the beginning of the opera that they're going to have to put up with that. She's a mezzo-soprano. And then we have got, famously, the Toreador, the bullfighter. who is basically just totally narcissistic dickwad, and basically spends the entire opera going around just being full of himself and letting you, the audience, and everyone else in the opera know exactly how full of himself he is. And beyond that, we have some minor characters. We got a couple of Carmen's friends. We've got a innkeeper of the inn that Carmen likes to hang out with. And then we also got a couple of contraband smugglers. So that's our main cast of characters. And from there, let's move on to Act 1. Act 1 opens with a bunch of excuses for lots of singing. So basically, the soldiers are just lazing around the main square in Sevilla, and they're commenting on basically how weird or hot or whatever the passers by are. And Michaela approaches them, asking if Jose's been around. And she's basically told, well, he's not here yet. And they're wink, wink, she's wink, wink, nod, nod, invited to come sit with the soldiers who are there. But being the nice, virtuous young woman she is, she says she's not gonna, fall for any form of temptation whatsoever, and says that she is going to wait. And so finally, the new guard with Jose shows up and changes to a big chorus. So as this is going on, the cigarette girls emerge from the factory, and they all start flirting with all of the soldiers in the square. And finally, we have Carmen appear on the scene. And she sings a song that makes it absolutely clear that despite all of the skiing that's gone on, that she's going to be the one you're going to want to pay attention to. You may have heard of it. Have a listen. Yep, that's the habanera. Love is like a gypsy child. It has no mother and it knows no laws. If you don't love me, I love you. And if I love you, watch out, Carmen sings. The men and the soldiers in the square then go, Carmen, who is it? Who do you really actually love? And she just kind of leads them on. Maybe it's you, maybe it's not you, and maybe it's Don Jose. And she throws a flower right at him. But at that point, instead of being flattered, he's just kind of annoyed with, what a slutty bitch she's acting like, essentially. And this doesn't really ensnare him in at first. But then the factory work at the tobacco factory resumes. And while that's going on, Michaela shows back up, and she sees Don Jose, and she gives him a letter that comes from his mom. And the letter basically says, I love you, son, a lot, and you need to come back to the village and marry Michaela as fast as possible. And, being the shy little bird she is, Michaela just sort of blushes at this. But Don Jose is ready at this to go back to his village and marry Michaela. How that's going to work out with his soldiering duties, I don't really know, but he agrees to it. Just in time for a commotion to erupt from the tobacco factory. And one of the tobacco girls has been stabbed. Now it quickly becomes apparent that it's Carmen who has stabbed another one of the girls after getting in a fight with her over something. Other soldiers show up, including Zuniga, and he orders Don Jose to tie her up after when she's questioned about whether or not she did it or what she did it or why. Carmen just basically comes back to them with the operatic version of fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you by singing nothing but tra-la-la-la-la-la-la at them. Zuniga goes back to prepare all of the paperwork for arresting her, and he tells Don Jose to keep an eye on her while she's tied up in the square. And then Carmen just kind of taunts him and goes, well, if you really love, I've decided I love you. I really, really do. And, if you love me back, then you're going to release me, right? And so Don Jose falls for her temptation, and instead of falling into his arms for protection, she pushes him to the ground and runs off, leaving him standing in the square to be arrested for not doing his job. End of Act 1. Act 2. So a few months have gone by, and we are now at an inn that Carmen and her gypsy friends and the soldiers like to frequent. And the gypsies are singing and dancing up a storm and generally entertaining everyone in another excuse for a bunch of singing and dancing. Carmen is there, and she's really happy to learn that finally Don Jose has been released from prison for letting her go when he was supposed to have stayed there with her tied up. And so just as she learns this, Escamillo, the Toreador, and his posse show up with him sucking his own about what a great Toreador he is. With this. So, after Escamillo has thoroughly sucked his own with that, he then looks at Carmen and is like, wow, she's really hot. I want to be with her. So this whole thing with Carmen falling in love and then just getting off by teasing the men who like her, she goes, if your lead were to explode, maybe it would not even reach mine, and totally gives Escamilla, who's totally full of himself, a reality check as to how he should think to himself. And then the soldiers have to leave, and it's just Carmen and her friends left there, and the smugglers show up, which is why the inn owner wanted the soldiers to leave, and they tell Carmen that they have some contraband that they need to do stuff with, and they're like, hey, you should really come with us. And the two other gypsies who are her friends are like, yeah, let's go. And Carmen's like, no, I want to really wait for Don Jose when he gets out of the barracks. And she does, giving him a really racy dance once he shows up to thank him for having let her go. But just in time for that, the muster at the barracks sounds, which means that Don Jose, who just got out of the prison, has to go back to the army barracks where he was. Carmen gets all haughty with him. Like, well, if you really loved me, you would just ignore that and you'd stay here with me. And so on and so forth. And at first Don Jose is like, I learned my lesson once. I love you, but I have to go back to the barracks. She's like, yeah, that's bullshit. And he's like, no, it really isn't bullshit. See, I have this flower, and it kept my faith through all my days in prison for you as a token of how much I really loved you. And Carmen's like, well, that's nothing. If you really, really loved me, you would just kind of ditch them and come with me to smuggle contraband. And at first he's back to go back to the barracks. When Sunila, who has gotten wind of the whole smuggling thing might be going on, he shows up at the end to question Carmen about how much she knows, and Don Jose again defends her. And he gets in a fight with a superior officer, leaving him with them no choice but to flee with Carmen and the smugglers. End of Act 2. Act 3. Carmen and Don Jose, along with her two friends, are now hiding out in the bushes along with the smugglers. And they're both kind of bored with the smuggler's life, always having to, sneak around in the countryside and not really do anything. So Carmen's friends are telling their fortunes with tarot cards. And apparently because this is some pun in French about love and death, her two friends get cards that are foretelling their love that's about to become in the future, but then they tell Carmen's death. So she's disturbed by this, just in time for this whole thing to go on, where the women in the smugglers' camp have to distract the customs guards so the other guys can smuggle more contraband. And rather than being, one of the head guys in the inner circle of the smuggling ring by now, Don Jose is left behind on guard duty, and he's kind of kept around as, the guy, we're lucky to keep you around and that kind of stuff. So he's incensed. Shortly after that, Michaelia shows up, having discovered their camp, but she's the scared, innocent, good little girl that she is. And so when she hears someone fire a gunshot off, it's Don Jose, she immediately ducks into the bush for hiding. And that shot which Don Jose fired actually was at Escamilla, who is also tracked into the camp. So he shows up and is like, well, yeah, I'm now here because I have decided that I really, really love Carmen too. After basically having ruined his life as much as he can insofar in the story, Don Jose is understandably very jealous and very pissed and having none of it. So the two of them get in a fight just in time for everyone else to come back, and Escamillo beats a hasty retreat, all the while inviting everyone there but Don Jose to come and see his next bullfight and see what a great toreador he is. So he goes running off, and as he does, Michaelia is finally discovered hiding in the bush, and Carmen is basically like, oh yeah, you're one of those good girls, well, good luck getting laid ever in your life ever, and she just brushes her off. But Michaelia is there with news that his mother is dying and that she really is sick to her heart with what Don Jose has done, but he'll forgive her if he just comes back to her now. And so, seeing that Carmen and her, various fleeting infatuation is flickering, Don Jose decides to go, fuck this, I am going to leave Carmen here and return to my mother. And in the distance, Escamillo, as the act ends, is once again heard sucking his own by singing the Toreador song about what a great bullfighter he is, hinting at where this is going in the beginning of Act 4. Act 4, we are now back in Seville, and there is a bullfight going on. Zuniga, the officer, and Carmen's two friends are there, and they are waiting in the crowd along with everyone for the arrival of the various people that are involved in bullfighting, basically. So it's another great excuse for pageantry of here are the picadors, and here are the cholos, and here are the whatever, and of course this is capped off by the toreador, who enters, with him and Carmen now being the next hot and heavy item on the society pages of Sevilla. And so Escamilla, having to actually do his bullfighting thing after he declares his true love for Carmen, goes off to kill a bull, and that's when Carmen's two friends show up, and they're like, well, Don Jose, who's gone back to his mother, and his mother has now died, but he is now in the area, and he's heard that you're now with Escamillo, and he's, leaving him to twist in the wind after he's basically thrown his life away, and he is really, really pissed. And so they're like, don't stay here alone, you're not safe, come with us. And Carmen, being Carmen, is like, well, I don't give a fuck what he thinks, and I'm gonna do what I want, when I want, when I want it. And so she stays there, and Don Jose shows up being like, your love is the only thing I have left in my life after everything else has gone away, and you better love me back. And Carmen is like, yeah, no, fuck that, I'm not doing it, and I'm with Escamillo for however long that suits me. And then Don Jose says, last chance, you either love me and you be with me, or that's it. And Carmen throws out a ring that he gave her at some point as another token of his love, like, fuck you. And at that point, Don Jose totally loses his shit with her and stabs her, just as Escamillo is finally having his dick sucked by someone else other than himself in the name of the entire crowd over the bull he's just killed. And Don Jose kneels over Carmen's corpse, going, "Carmen, Carmen, my love," even though she didn't really love him anymore, and arguably never really did, and just fucked up his whole life. And everyone rushes in, discovering what Don Jose has done, and Don Jose is taken off to prison to be executed. The end. So there you have it. That's Carmen, which is undeniably a phenomenon through to this modern day, which really holds up, but is a bit of a plot of loose morals and raciness, which, especially in the mid-19th century, wasn't going to be what you were expecting if you were taking your kids to the theater on a Saturday afternoon in order to see the equivalent of Mickey Mouse. Really, it's a story about a woman who tempts, at the beginning, a really affable, likable guy into making a bunch of poor life choices such that he throws his life away for her and then kills her for being an undeniable bitch that just basically was using him this entire time. And in fact, it's one of my favorite quotes, which I'm paraphrasing here, about the nature of love and life and also about opera, which is the plot boils down to this. Michaela loves Don Jose. Don Jose loves Carmen. Carmen loves Escamillo. And Escamillo is mostly in love with himself. Escamillo is the only one in this opera who walks away from its events, more or less, unscathed. Moral, I guess, being, don't fall in love, no matter how tempting the infatuation might be. Better to love yourself like yours truly, that Slavic writer guy. Like this or don't, subscribe to my channel or don't. I don't give a fuck, because I'm going to keep doing what I do for as long as I can do it. There's Carmen, one of the most famous works of all of opera. Until next time, as we say, Tukio Sloveni, na svidenje.